The UFC fans are finally striking back. That's right. 100,000 signatures have been signed on a petition to strip Jon Jones of the UFC heavyweight belt. That's right. Tony Has Died is the name of the meme page MMA content creator that has come up with this petition, and it's going viral. Not only have 100,000 plus people signed it, but people like Ben Askren, Daniel Cormier are talking about it on their talk show. I'm pretty sure Chael Sonnen may have mentioned it. There's a lot that's going on. Not only is this petition picking up a lot of steam, but MMA fans have absolutely had it, because on every single post that you see on the UFC's Instagram, everybody is just commenting, strip Jon Jones. It doesn't matter what the post is. You want to talk about tough? Daniel Cormier, Chael Sonnen. The UFC is promoting their newest season of Tough. And actually, I'll be honest, guys, I don't watch Tough anymore, but this one actually seems pretty intriguing. But the fans don't care. They just want Jon Jones to get out of the UFC. They no longer want him as the undisputed champion. And I actually think this is really good. I don't think I've ever seen this. I've never seen this kind of backlash from the fans, and we'll get into that as well. But first and foremost, major news. Erin Blanchfield aims to shape the division's future against Macy Barber. That is the first thing that we're going to be discussing. The path to UFC championship comes in many different forms. Some fighters carve their way through on an undefeated streak like Khamzat Chimaev, and then some like Erin Blanchfield aim to shape the division's future against Macy Barber. That is an absolute article, man. I mean, we'll talk about that on my boxing channel. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Daniel Cormier, by the way, apparently Tom Aspinall is going to announce major news today. There may be a fight announcement, and I hope it's Tom Aspinall versus Gane. It definitely won't be Tom Aspinall versus Jones, but let's get back on track. I'm just saying, expect some news from Tom Aspinall. Let's get back on track. I also disagree with Daniel Cormier's take. He says that Jones's ego will not allow him to walk away without fighting Tom Aspinall, and I still think that DC's been very charitable to Jon Jones throughout the years, despite what some fans say. Every time Daniel Cormier says anything with a hint of criticism against Jon Jones, people just post the head kick and say salty Cormier. But actually, Cormier has been very charitable to Jon Jones throughout the years. He's been very cordial with him, and I think he's giving Jones a little bit too much of the benefit of the doubt here. I don't think Jones's ego is going to force him to fight Tom Aspinall. I think Jones's ego is actually forcing him to do the opposite. There's some people that still think that Jon Jones, as I said in a couple of videos ago, I said that some people view Jon Jones as Tootsie or Teetsy, the Lion and the Lion King 2, or I'm sorry, Madagascar 2. I messed that up, but some people still think of Jon Jones as if he's like Tootsie from Madagascar 2, that's the lion that Alex fights, and he's the massive lion where Alex is thinking he's going to go into a dance contest, thinking he's going to be muzzing on him, and then Tootsie is like 20 feet tall, and he disappears out of the cave, and he comes, rumbling through. That's not Jon Jones. That's not Jon Jones. And what they're saying here is, this is what the casuals say, and what also old heads say, because, of course, the old heads, like Daniel Cormier, even though he had a heated rivalry with Jon Jones, he still wants the world to know that Jon Jones is this bad man, because that was the boogeyman when he was competing. And these new guys today, man, they're tough, but they don't know what I was competing against, right? So DC, he wants to think of Jon Jones as this guy where Jones is making a calculated decision because he doesn't need to fight Aspinall, but his ego and his emotions are telling him, but I got to kick that guy's ass. Actually, that's not true. It's the opposite. His ego has been pumped up for the last 20 years with people telling him that he's the baddest guy on the planet, with comments on Instagram and TikTok or whatever saying, Jon Jones. Whenever there's a fight situation brought up, Jon Jones enters the chat. Jon Jones has been the guy that's talked about as the toughest guy ever, the baddest fighter of all time, right? That's the MMA fighter that people bring up when ultra casual fans talk about Mike Tyson being the baddest human ever, right? Jon Jones's ego has been built by people telling him for the last 20 years that no one on this planet could take him in a fight. And now he sees hardcore MMA fans saying what Tom Aspinall could probably lay him out cold. And he recognizes that Tom Aspinall's big, he can grapple, he has freakish speed, okay? And Jones has no physical advantages. And he himself is understanding that he's getting old. His ego is telling him, I would get embarrassed if I fight this guy. Or I could get embarrassed, rather, because there's a chance he wins. But logically, I think I could win, even though it's a really tough matchup. But fuck, dude, how would I handle that? Like, imagine I lose, and then the way that my career ends, this legendary career where I have established myself as being the GOAT of the sport, the way that it ends is me getting highlight reel KO'd and getting clowned. After wasting everyone's time for 2 years, people are going to rub it in my face that I lost. That's his ego telling him not to get into the cage with Tom Aspinall. Because again, his ego is built off of being the greatest fighter of all time. That's why he cares so deeply about not losing. He doesn't want to lose. That's the one thing that scares Jon Jones, losing. He lost to Dominic Reyes, got his hand raised. Everyone knows he lost. And then he took 2 years off to recover. Okay, and I guarantee you part of that recovery was for his ego. So this couldn't be more false. I know a lot of these old head fighters, they want to think of Jon Jones as this guy where, man, but Jon Jones would never want to walk away from a fight. You just know it hurts Jon Jones not to fight Tom Aspinall. They're talking about this like it's painful for Jon Jones to not fight Aspinall. Like he's itching, like a person having withdrawals because he just wants to fight. Everyone knows Jones is just itching for a fight. But it's the calculated brain of Jones, where he's at the chalkboard every night and he's calculating the X's and the dot in the I's on why this is actually a bad move because he doesn't need to, right? What more does he have to prove? Actually, that part of Jon Jones is telling him he should fight Aspinall. His ego is the thing where he's like, dude, fuck that. I can't lose to this guy and I don't want to get embarrassed, okay? Because my brand would be changed forever. So, it's just bullshit. It's just fucking bullshit, this narrative that Jon Jones is just pacing back and forth. Man, I want to kick this guy's ass. Man. It's just nonsense. Jones is thinking, yeah, it's pretty funny how I'm trolling Tom Aspinall and pissing off all the fans, man. Fuck them, man. That's what Jones is thinking. All right? He's not thinking like... This idea that Jones is just in the corner fucking itching because he really is just wanting to fight and his team is holding him back saying, Jones, no, don't fight. We know that you're just itching to get in the cage. He doesn't want anything to do with Aspinall, dude. He doesn't want to be within 5,000 feet of Tom Aspinall, okay? He's never fighting him. It's his ego that's getting in the way. So I just wanted to tackle that. But let's get back to this petition. 100,000 people have signed a petition to strip Jon Jones of the undisputed UFC heavyweight belt, okay? And this just goes to show how fed up people are. I mean, people have been fed up for more than a year at this point, but now we're signing petitions just to prove to the UFC that actually we really don't want this to go on any longer. There are 100,000 of us that have taken the time out of our day to sign this petition, okay? And we want those numbers to continue to go up. And you know what? Not only has that been the case, we're on the Macy Barber thing, but everything that the UFC posts now, we don't give a fuck about it unless they actually start doing what's right, which is getting rid of Jon Jones's belt. Listen, just strip him of the title. Simple as. Listen, Calvin Kattar and Steve Garcia is a great fight. I'm looking forward to that. Steve Garcia is an absolute marauder. Calvin Kattar, everyone's, oh man, Calvin Kattar got his ass kicked by Yusuf Salal, man. We hate Yusuf Salal now. He's the new Mario Batista. I'm going to be rooting for Calvin Kattar. Like, dude, I get it. Calvin Kattar is a vet, and people are going to root for the vet. But listen, People got to go over that Yusuf Salau fight because he whooped Calvin Kattar and only had one round where he ran around looking like a chicken without its head. That's not the way people depicted that fight, where they're acting like he ran around for 3. All right? He ran around for 1. Either way, this is a sick fight. This is a big step up. But first and foremost, we don't care. Get rid of Jon Jones as UFC heavyweight champion. That's what I'm saying. Tough. They're marketing tough. Daniel Cormier, Chael Sonnen, Uncle Chael. Listen, that's great, but we don't really care. Jon Jones is still the undisputed champion. He's holding up the career of Tom Aspinall. He's holding up the heavyweight division. We're not seeing any high-level heavyweight fights, nor are we seeing any heavyweight title fights. Tom Aspinall's fights are like 20 seconds long. This guy should be fighting 3 times a year. He's taking no damage in his fights. Yet, he's going to be fighting once every year and a half, once every 2 years. It's bullshit. We have a champion that's capable of finishing fights in 30 seconds. You know, people want to talk about how heavyweight champions have always been inactive. Stipe Miocic had a 5-round fight with Ngannou. Stipe Miocic had been getting dropped here and there. He got dropped by Overeem, right? There were moments in Stipe's fights, like a 1-round war with Daniel Cormier, and then he gets knocked out, and then he has a 4-round war with him, and then he has a 5-round war with him. Of course he's going to take some time off. Tom Aspinall has been getting easy finishes, no adversity in his fights. And we have to wait decades to see this guy get back in the cage because Jon Jones is prancing around with his fucking undeserved title. And you know what? Every single post that the UFC puts up there on Instagram is getting flooded with this because we're fucking done. We're totally done with it. Khalil Roundtree, he's a violent man in the octagon. This is a bad man. Here's his highlight reel over Anthony Smith. We don't care unless you actually start acting like the world's best MMA promotion. All right? 60,000 plus signatures. That was a few days ago. Now it's over 100,000. I'm loving this. The pressure is on. And you know what? I think there was another one where someone mentioned something about the Yair Rodriguez fight, the Yair and Volk fight. That was also in the comments. I'm just going to say this. I actually think that that is the most disgraceful fight you could possibly make before we get on to the next thing. We're going to talk about Mavzar as well. The Yair versus Volk fight is literally worse than the Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall saga because at least that's been going on for years. Okay, that I don't know if it's worse, but like that is the final straw. That is the final fucking nail in the coffin of the UFC if they make frickin' Volk versus Yair, dude. That would be a disgrace. We've had enough with these undeserved title fights, with them holding up the division, with them not promoting their champions, okay? I saw a post from the guy that made the petition, Tony Has Died on Instagram, where he's talking about this is what the UFC used to do to market their fighters, and it's like an Anderson Silva ad from the mid or early 2010s, and they're playing the DMX song, okay, or whatever, whatever Anderson Silva's song was. Ain't no sunshine where they come. But either way, it's like Anderson Silva in his spider pose, looking across the octagon before the fight starts, and it's like the super cinematic zoom out. Ain't no sunshine where he goes, and then it cuts to how the UFC promotes these days, and it's Dana White with his Instagram phone, like fucking Instagram phone. I sound like a boomer. It's Dana White pulling out his freaking phone and saying, "What's up, guys? It's UFC 299, and we got some good fights for you." And it's just Dana White yapping, pulling out a phone, doing a completely careless announcement. We got to get back to real effort. We got to get back to the 2010s of effort, man. When they were doing the Aldo and Conor McGregor No Church in the Wild. You know the music video No Church in the Wild for Kanye and Jay-Z, where there's like a riot in the street? They did that on the Las Vegas Strip with Conor McGregor hooligans and Jose Aldo hooligans and McGregor and Aldo walking towards each other with No Church in the Wild playing. Okay? That's the thing they used to do. They did one for Holloway and Aldo. They were doing epic promos for just regular title fights. I know Aldo versus McGregor wasn't a regular one, but they did it for Holloway and Aldo. Now it's just Dana White yapping. And at every single UFC commercial, if you're watching primetime ESPN, the extent of the promo is just like a highlight of Magomed Ankalaev, John Anik will yell, and then a highlight of Alex Pereira. And then it just cuts to the feature fight. Oh, Gagey and fucking Hooker highlights. And that's it. And it's like one highlight, NPC, free music. And now we're getting these undeserved title fights. We're getting O'Malley versus Merab. We're getting Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis 2. We got O'Malley versus Vera. Every now and then we get Merab versus Umar, which is still like, okay, but did Umar even deserve it? But either way, every now and then we get Makhachev versus Arman, even though it didn't even happen. But it's becoming more often than not the case where the title fights that we're getting are the undeserved ones, the ones that we don't want. Okay? Volk versus Yair 2. I know that there's not going to be a petition to not make that fight or whatever, but I'm just saying, if the UFC announces Volkanovski versus Yair 2, I'm not watching that fight. Volkanovski's my favorite fighter. And listen, dude, I don't mean to be like, oh, I'm gonna grandstand over here and whatnot, but like, we just can't watch it. I'm sorry, but that would be like, we just can't fucking allow them to get away with this stuff, you know? And speaking of Volk versus Yair too, and that's why I love those comments, because like, we've had enough, and we're gonna show the UFC. We're putting it in everyone's face. We've had enough. We don't give a fuck about what you're posting. Just do what we say. Start listening to your fan base and get in touch and start promoting. Because I don't want to hear this nonsense about, well, the UFC knows what's what. They know better than anyone else. You know, I was listening to an interview with Merab Dvalishvili's coach, and he said, listen, the UFC knows better than anyone else when it comes to business. And it's like, yes, I understand. To a certain degree, they're looking at the numbers. Maybe Yair would sell a little bit more. Maybe they'd make a little bit more money. But guess what? That's assuming that the promotion stays the same. That's assuming that the UFC isn't willing to budge an inch on their style of promoting these days, which is minimal effort, pumping out Apex cards, and Dana White making an announcement on his iPhone or whatever. Dude, if they actually promoted, not even in a way that we've never seen before, if they just went back to the level of effort that they were doing in the 2010s for promotion, they would completely take over sports, man. They could. Maybe not take over sports. I know football, soccer's pretty big, but you get my point. All right? Like, business would boom if they went back to that. So I don't buy that, well, they know better. I'm sorry, man, but I actually disagree with that. And you know what? Matt Brown, famous coach at American Top Team. Okay? He explains why Movsar Evloev getting passed over for a title shot is just business as usual. Let's see what Matt Brown had to say. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Matt Brown? I'm confusing it with Mike Brown. I'm sorry. Matt Brown is the former UFC fighter, crafty vet, tough as an old leather boot. They used to lay people out. Mike Brown is the coach. So Matt Brown says, you have to decide what you want to watch as entertainment, which is what the UFC is, or if you want to watch an actual sport, which is not necessarily what the UFC is. Brown said on the latest episode of The Fighter versus the Writer, an actual sport would have rankings from a third party. They would have mandatory challenges. They would have a lot of things that the UFC just doesn't have. And that's true. Because they didn't build a company based on sport, the sport is what they're selling, but the actual competitive ranks and the way that matches are made is not sport. They got rid of tournaments a long time ago. And it's like, yeah, you know, he has a point. That's true. But I just want to discuss what that means in regards to Yair versus Volk. So he's basically saying that Yair versus Volk, fights like that, what that is that's just the UFC trying to make a big fight from a pure business perspective. They want to make as much money as possible, and they've decided that Volk versus Yair is what we want. We're going for entertainment. We're not here for sports and competition. We're here for flash, popularity, and hype, right? But the thing is, that isn't the case with some of these undeserved matchups. First off, that's assuming that these fights like Volk versus Yair are bringing in casual fans. That's not true. Volk, as much as he's one of my favorite fighters and he's a big name in the UFC, does not really transcend the sport of MMA. He's not pulling in any new eyes. Okay, he's kind of peaked as far as popularity goes. And Yair Rodriguez has like 700,000 followers on Instagram, and he's been in the UFC for freaking 10 years. All right? Those guys fighting each other are not pulling in lots of eyes. I guarantee you, if they make that Volk versus Yair fight, the amount of people that watch that is probably going to be the same amount that would watch Volk versus Evloev. Because again, Volk versus Evloev, Yair versus Volk, it doesn't matter if Yair has a more dynamic style. Like, he's not pulling in any more eyes. And also, Volk versus Evloev is the more entertaining matchup because it's more competitive. Because Mavzar is from the Caucasus region of the world, where that just gives you automatic aura. It gives you automatic, mystique and an ability to wrestle in the eyes of everyone, right? Even though we know he can wrestle, maybe it's a little bit overrated. But the point that I'm making is Mavzar Evloev, the EV, the undefeated record, it reminds people of Khabib. It gives him aura. The fans know he deserves it. They want to see the fight. Only hardcore fans are going to watch a Volk fight anyway. It's like when it comes down to entertainment, we're more entertained by a guy that actually will be able to stuff takedowns against Volk. We're more entertained by two well-rounded fighters that will cancel out on the ground, may have some good grappling exchanges, but will most likely cancel out on the ground, and will have a great stand-up fight. And you know what? There are also some questions. Let's talk about the grappling. Will Mavzar be able to take Volk down? Volk's takedown defense is amazing. We saw what he did against Makhachev. He's got that brick wall level takedown defense. The Craig Jones specifics. That's interesting. The grappling is interesting. Mavzar doesn't have any pop, but he's the younger fighter and he's pretty fast, and Volk's getting older. How will the striking look? Will Volk destroy him on the feet, or will Mavzar surprise us? That's exciting. The fight will be high-paced. Both guys have great cardio. Both guys have high output. Volk is not a fighter that's going to get held down and smudged to a 5-round decision stinkfest, and neither is Evloev. So the point that I'm making is that's an action-packed, competitive fight that fans want to see, and only hardcore fans are watching to begin with. And this is this is not me going after Matt Brown. This is just me talking to the idea that the UFC is just doing what's good for business, and it's entertainment, right? It isn't entertainment to do Volk versus Yair at all. All that is they're just desperate to get the UFC belt in the hands of a Mexican fighter. That's all it is. For years, they've wanted MMA to be bigger in Mexico, the UFC to be bigger in Mexico, because Mexico has a huge boxing fan base, and boxing is like Mexico's #1 sport next to soccer, and the Mexicans love combat sports. The UFC is desperate to get Mexico in on the UFC because there's a big market that they could tap into, and they're just forcing it. They want Yair to head kick Volk, okay? They want to give Yair the easiest layup of his life. They're just going to give him 1,000 opportunities. That's not entertainment. That's just pissing us the fuck off, okay? And the Mexicans don't even want that shit, all right? Most of them don't. And again, the fight is not... Evloev, I'm not going to sit here and say he's the most entertaining fighter. He's not a boring fighter. He had an entertaining fight with Aljo. He had an entertaining fight with Arnold Allen. No, he didn't, man. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. The only person that said he had a boring fight with Arnold Allen was Dana White. That was it. Dana White was pissed off in a bad mood, and he used that fight as a scapegoat to take his anger out on, even though the freaking co-main event was a women's fight, and it fucking sucked. But either way, that fight was good. Arnold rocked Evloev. Evloev rocked Allen. It was a competitive fight. The Ige fight was entertaining. The Diego Lopez fight was entertaining. This guy's last 4 fights were entertaining. Him versus Volk, stylistically, is super competitive and entertaining. That's the fight we want to see. So this idea that they're doing it for business, dude, it's better for business to make the fight that more people want to see. And I don't buy that, oh, if Yair becomes a champion, everything in Mexico changes. Bullshit. Yair does not have potential to be a big star in Mexico. He doesn't. Maybe Brandon Moreno did. And you know what? We saw Brandon Moreno, a Mexican, win the belt and defend it. And he was in multiple title fights, and he's still main events, plenty of Mexican cards, and he's still in the mix. He's a flyweight, so that unfortunately kind of puts a cap on how big he can get and whatever. But either way, Brandon Moreno kind of represents the Mexican style of fight a little bit more than Yair. Not that Yair isn't entertaining and tough and whatnot, but Brandon Moreno has that gritty Mexican boxing style, right? And we saw him as champion. Did that make the UFC the biggest thing in Mexico? Did that make MMA take over boxing? No! It sure as fuck isn't going to do that when Yair Rodriguez, even if he somehow flukes a win and gets a KO with a front kick after spazzing out, Yair, a guy that is a win one, lose one in the top 10 fighter, he is not going to hold on to the belt. And he doesn't have the personality or the fucking aura to become a big star, okay? He just doesn't. Like, he's a really entertaining fighter, okay? I like Yair Rodriguez's fight style. He's very entertaining, but he doesn't have potential to be a star. And him being a champ is not going to change shit. Sorry, but it isn't going to change jack shit. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm not sorry, guys. You guys agree with me. I'm talking to Dana White. I'm talking to the UFC, all right? So, again, Matt Brown, UFC legend, tough as an old leather boot. He's explaining why. And this is why. He's right. This is why the UFC goes to Yair. But it just goes to show, and again, there's this idea that the UFC knows better and they're doing what's best for business. And it's like, dude, they're out of touch. They're out of touch. I don't buy that there's some guy in a lab coat, calculating all the numbers, and he finds out that Yair versus Volk is going to make $3 extra million. Bullshit. Okay? That's assuming that they don't market Volk versus Evloev. If they marketed it, and I know that costs money, but what? Their marketing budget these days is like, what, $5 a month? They've got like Instagram Plus or whatever. They've got like their baseline, basic Facebook Plus, whatever. They've got their basic social media, YouTube premiums. Okay? That's the extent of their marketing payments. All right? Their marketing fees. It's like $15 a month for them, it seems. Dana White's literally getting on Instagram. That's it. That's the only promo they do. And, the fucking team that makes the commercials on TV, it's just the same shit every time. I'm sorry, but if you could spend, $10,000, man, $10,000 to promote Volk versus Evloev. And I guarantee you that's going to blow away and create tons more hype. And will sell more pay-per-views. The rubber is meeting the road. This is what happens when the UFC pushes too far into, thinking that they can just sucker their fans into watching anything. We're done with these undeserved title fights. If they make Volk versus Yair, I'm not watching that shit. All right? If they do Tom Aspinall versus Gon for an interim title, we need to riot. Now, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter that much if Tom is the undisputed champ and the interim champ. At this point, we know Tom Aspinall's the champ. Everybody that looks at his record in the future is going to know that Tom Aspinall was the real champ during this era. They'll still see a belt emblem on the UFC record website next to the interim champ fights. He's the champ right now. So interim or not, he's the champ in all of our eyes. But it's just going to be pathetic if they make another interim title fight, just to have an ability to do a Jon Jones fight. It's like, dude, you could strip Jon Jones of the title and he can walk right into a title fight if he wants. He doesn't have to be the undisputed champ going into a title fight, okay? I just want to see Tom Aspinall fight. That's it. I don't care who it's against. We're tired of waiting. Tom Aspinall's fights are 10 seconds long. He takes no damage. This guy should be fighting 3 times a year. He's in his prime. They should be promoting him. Tom Aspinall has everything you could possibly want to promote, all right? They're promoting O'Malley and they're giving O'Malley 50,000 opportunities to fight for the belt so he can get his front kick KO over Merab. But, O'Malley has the personality of a fucking rock compared to Tom Aspinall. And listen, O'Malley's entertaining, 100%. He's very entertaining. I like watching him fight. Tom Aspinall isn't this trash talker, this, larger-than-life personality, but Tom Aspinall is more entertaining. He's a better speaker. You want to listen to his interviews. He is someone that people would like to hear talk. And he also has unbelievable finishing ability in the UFC where he's knocking people's heads into orbit. And he's from the UK, which is always good for combat sports. We talked about how, it'd be okay for the UFC to have a Mexican champion and whatnot. It's always great when they have a UK champ. Okay? They should be promoting Tom Aspinall. They should be sounding the alarm about him. They should be screaming from the fucking rooftops about him, but they're not. Dana White instead is getting on his freaking Instagram and just doing a lackluster, no-effort announcement. And it's like, okay, maybe you can announce the fights like that, but then give us some real promos. Actually go, because wouldn't it be nice if we got fights to be hyped the way that they were in the 2010s? Yeah, it's great to grow the sport, and they should be doing that, but I want to feel hyped. I want to see people buzzing about these fights. I remember I was a casual back in 2016. I watched McGregor versus Nate Diaz at Buffalo Wild Wings, all right? And there were, plenty of people in the building. Most people that watch fights at Buffalo Wild Wings where you're, 70 feet away from the TV, and you got to look up 100 feet. Most people that watch fights at Buffalo Wild Wings are probably casuals anyway, but I'm like, dude, most people in the room were casuals watching McGregor versus Nate Diaz. There was buzz about that fight. There was buzz about McGregor versus Nate Diaz 1, all right? I remember that was going viral, the back and forths, and I know that McGregor's a once-in-a-lifetime guy, but still, the UFC just needs to put a little bit more effort into these promos, and you'll get the buzz going again. But you will get none of that if they do Yair versus Volk. Yair versus Volk, I mean, that's got to be the last straw. I'm just not going to watch that. I'm not watching that shit, all right? It's got to be Volk versus Mavzar. If they do Tom versus Gon, I'll be really happy. Even if they announce it for an interim, that would really piss me off. But listen, I just want to see Aspinall fight, and it doesn't matter if he has the undisputed title. We know he's the fucking champ, all right? I just want to see them stop delaying Tom Aspinall and sidelining him. So, yeah, that's it. 100,000 people have had enough. Over 100,000 people. We are taking to the UFC's Instagram to demand better. We want better. We want effort, okay? We want passion. We want promo. We want the best versus the best. We want to see these competitive matchups. Enough with the constant bullshit rematches. Okay? It's not entertaining. Who told you it was a good idea to do Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis 2 instead of Dricus versus Hamzat? Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.